So can't help you on that. Sorry. All right. No other questions? Let's move on then. All right. Ownership of real estate. Now, we're going to have a few words and concepts introduced here, and people are going to scratch their head. If you pre-read this chapter, it's going to be a much easier discussion. If you didn't, your questions are going to be endless. So please, guys, be considerate of other folks. Be considerate of me having to answer these questions, and think before you ask a question. Did I understand the concept? Did I not understand the concept? Why am I asking a question? Is it pertinent to the information, or is it just a what if question? Please don't ask the what ifs, please. So moving on, at the end of this chapter, you should be able to describe different forms of ownership and explain the differences between condominium ownership, cooperative ownership, and time-sharing ownership. All right. So the first type of ownership in real property is called tenancy and severalty. Well, how many people are in severalty, Tim? Well, here's the thing. One person. What? It says severalty. I know. Well, that doesn't make sense. Here's the problem, guys. Many of the common terms and phrases we use in real estate and law stem from the old British common law that we live by under British control. We've adopted their basic structure of law, modified it for our use, and kept several of the terms. So if you are a sole person, one person, single, owning real estate with nobody else, you own it in severalty, meaning all other interests being severed. The only interest you have is yours. I know it sounds weird, but this is the term you have to remember to pass the test. Tenancy and severalty is ownership of property by one individual, no more, just one, with all other interests severed. That was easy. Did anybody not understand that before I move on? Apparently, Charles and Cynthia, you have questions, so I'll wait for them. Or not. Okay, so I see your dialogue bar is open, so I'm assuming you're asking questions, guys. Cynthia Elayant and Charles Herman. It's about the term tenancy in common. We haven't even gotten to there yet, Charles. We'll get there. We're only talking about tenancy and severalty, ownership of property by one person. So again, guys, please, I know you're anxious to get this stuff under your belt, but we got to take it in the proper structured order. So ownership of property by one individual is called tenancy in severalty. Now, what if there are two or more people wishing to own property? Well, there's options here now, guys. Let's say A, B, and C want to own property together. So you have A, B, and C all owning one piece of property. A owns 50%. B and C own 25% each. Together, they own 100% ownership interest. Right? He's 50, and these are 25 and 25 ownership percentages. That's okay. You can do that. A lot of guys do it. A lot of investors have unequal ownership interest in jointly owned property. Because of the unequal ownership interest percentages, they are tenants in common. What? Tenants in common. What does that mean? It means that there's more than one owner and they all own the same property together as common owner interests, but if one dies, then C, let's say C dies, his heirs get his share. So if C dies, now A, B, and C's heirs own the property as tenants in common because of what is known as inheritance. A, B, and C own property, C dies, his heirs get his share. It's just that simple. That's tenants in common. Let's bring up another whiteboard. A, B, and C are all 33% ownership interests of property in one piece of property. They all have the same percentage of interest in the property. They all have the same possession interests in the property. They all took title to the property at the same time. If they have established these four, what they call unities, if they have possession, interest, time, and title all equal, they may not have tenancy in common. It all depends on this hinging factor. What happens if C dies? It does not go to the heirs. His interest gets divided up equally under A and B's ownership. And now only A and B own the property as 50-50 owners, each having the same possession, interest, time, and title as the other. And because the heirs don't have an ownership interest, it is called it's called the right of survivorship, meaning the last man standing gets everything. So if C dies, his heirs get nothing. His interests are split up between A and B. If B dies, then A is the sole owner in severalty now in a 100% ownership interest of the property. Who would do such a thing? Believe it or not, many small businesses who have multiple owners are created this way. That way they can keep control of the corporation without having to go into family members. And if you've ever been in business with family, they can mess things up terribly. So understand, guys, I'm going to go back here and refresh everybody again on this concept. First of all, tenants in common, more than one owner, they all have the right to possess the property. They may all have the same or unequal ownership interests. They may have taken ownership all at the same time, and maybe they even have the same title with everybody's name on it when they purchased it. Those four unities are almost enough to say they're joint tenants, but it's not because of the right of survivorship. So, A, B, and C all have equal possession, interest, time, and title. They have the four unities. But here's the thing. If C dies, his rights go to his heirs. There is no right of survivorship, therefore it can't be joint tenant, it must be tenants in common. The same could hold true where A, B, and C own property and they have possession, time, and title, but they have unequal ownership interests. Because they don't have all four unities, they could never be joint tenants. They are tenants in common, which means if C dies, his heirs get his share. I know this sounds confusing, but if you had pre-read this, you have a very basic and good understanding of what we're talking about. If you didn't, you may probably have a bazillion questions right now. So once again, tenancy in severalty is one person owning property. Tenants in common, multiple persons owning property. You don't have to have all 4 unities, and there's no right of survivorship. But joint tenancy means all 4 unities being equal and the right of survivorship so that the last man standing gets everything. Any questions about these 3 types of ownership interests? Joint tenancy shares get split between remaining owners. Tenants in common, if one dies, the shares go to the heirs. Yes, there's right of survivorship. What did the I stand for? Interest. It's right in your book, guys. It's all on the bottom of page 109 on the 14th edition. I'm not seeing any other questions. Still don't understand the point where you said the shares go to the other tenants and not to the heirs. Right of survivorship you're talking about. Okay, one more time. In joint tenancy, if one owner dies, his interest, his ownership of the property does not go to the heirs. It goes to the surviving owners equally. So now A and B have joint tenancy of the property in total. There's no other parties. The heirs are not included because of the right of survivorship. I hope that gave a little better understanding. Both tenancy in common and joint tenancies have could. They don't have to in a tenancy in common. You could have unequal interest. You could have ownership at different times, be named with different titles. So if you don't have all 4 unities, you could not be joint tenants. Joint has right of survivorship where remaining owners get the share. Common tenancy or one dies goes to the heirs. Yes. Welcome. Not seeing any other questions? Oh, there it is. So joint tenancy saves a lot of trouble dealing with many other unknown people. Exactly, David. In other words, A, B, and C, let's call it a business. Own a, fabric business. What you don't want is heirs, family members coming in and trying to change things with the partners. That never works out. Therefore, most businesses, when jointly owned, are structured as joint tenancy, whereby if one party dies, the remaining business owners inherit that person's share, not the heirs. That way they can keep control and keep the business going the way they want. Where is this made up or registered? Oh, you mean the joint tenancy or tenancy in common? That's done by your attorney and the people purchasing how they want to take possession of the property. So if some people ask you, how should I take ownership interest of the property as tenancy in common or joint tenants? You would say this: I don't know. You should talk to an attorney because you're asking a legal question and I'm not an attorney. I can't answer that question. What is the joint tenancy is with your child? Sorry, Debbie. Let me try to understand what you're talking about. What if the joint tenancy is with your child? What if the joint tenancy is with your child? So here it is, you and your child, both 50-50 ownerships as joint tenants. Your child dies, then you are the owner in severalty with no one else. If you die, then the child is the owner in severalty and no one else. If you both die, then whoever's left in the family, if it was joint tenancy, would not get the business unless a court determined it would be in the best interest to hand it off to the heirs. Now, if there's only two parties that are related, then joint tenancy may not be the best thing, because if you both die at the same time, then what happens to the property? It goes to probate court and gets tied up for a while. Can the deceased heirs it in a joint, suit in what? Can a joint heirs suit in a, you missed me on that one, Trinidad. I'm not sure what you're asking. Does creating joint tenancy vary across states? All you have to know is New Jersey. That's it. I'm not talking about any other state law. If I did, we start confusing everybody. So we're only concentrating on New Jersey. Now, a couple things about tenancy in common. One, no right of survivorship. Two, if multiple people buy property and the deed of conveyance doesn't specify how they own property, then their ownership interest defaults automatically to tenancy in common. One more time. A, B, and C buy property as tenants, buy property, A, B, and C. If the ownership interests are not specified in the deed of conveyance, then they are automatically defaulted to tenancy in common. Automatically defaults tenancy in common. Whether they intended to take joint tenancy or not, if they didn't specify, it's automatically defaulted to a tenancy in common. And that means if B dies, B's heirs get his share. No right of survivorship. So that's something you have to remember, is that if you take ownership of property, multiple people, and you don't specify the type of ownership you're taking, then it automatically defaults to tenants in common. Was there anybody else with a question before I move on? Please don't do the what ifs and all that other stuff, please. I'm not seeing any more questions, so hang on. Luciana, you have a question? Or not? No. Okay, no more questions. Let's move on. Tenancy and severalty, one person. Joint tenants in common, multiple owners, no right of survivorship, do not have to have all four unities. Joint tenancy must have all four unities and right of survivorship. Now, tenancy by the entirety. This is a very special recognized ownership interest. It is the ownership interest enjoyed by married spouses. In New Jersey, married spouses enjoy a special place under law as one entity. In fact, the Constitution of the United States guarantees under the Fifth Amendment that you have the right against self-incrimination. And because you are husband and wife viewed as one entity, a spouse cannot be made to testify against their other spouse in a court of law, because you'd be violating the right of self-incrimination, and you can't do that. Therefore, a married couple is recognized as one entity, tenancy by the entirety. Now let's take a spousal marriage. They get married to buy a house. They live in that house. By all meaning, they are joint tenants of the property. Think about They all have the right to possess, husband and wife have the right to possess the property equally. They both have a 100% ownership interest in the property. They took the title at the same time. And if one spouse dies, the remaining spouse automatically gets the property, the marital residence, just like joint tenancy. However, if one spouse dies, their interest goes to the surviving spouse, right? Survivorship. And if one spouse wants to sell their share in the property, well, they can't. Think about it. Your husband wants to sell his half of the house to some other person. Would you allow that? Of course not. And besides, it's illegal to do. What would have to happen if the spouse wants to sell, they'd have to have the remaining spouse agree to sell and sign the agreement to sell. Without that signature, they can't sell because both parties are 100% ownership interest owners of the property. Tenancy by the entirety is viewed as one entity, spouse and spouse, one entity. So the law protects the interest of the entirety. Therefore, if one wants to sell their share in the house, the other must agree to sell their share and the whole house gets sold at once, or they don't sell at all. It's that simple. Any questions about tenancy by the entirety? I guess this would include gay, as we have been saying all day long, Robert, gay marriage was recognized in 213 as a legal entity in the state of New Jersey. So, yeah. So, David, in New York, we're not answering that question because we're only concentrating on New Jersey stuff. We're not talking about New York stuff. What is one spouse is not on the deed? Doesn't matter if it's the marital residence, they both own the property in 100% ownership interest right because they're married. Just to confirm, there are always exemptions? I'm not sure what you're talking about. What exemptions are you speaking of? What if a spouse, I'm sorry, what if spouse A bought the house 20 years later, gets remarried, now automatically the person owns the home? Yep. In New Jersey, I guess you're saying what if a spouse A bought the house 20 years? I think I just answered that. Anybody else with a question? Okay. Tenancy in common only relates to married couples. No. Tenancy in common is not married couples. Only tenancy by the entirety relates to married couples, not tenants in common. What happens to the house if a married couple divorces? Depends on the divorce decree that the judges issued, Antoine. Everything comes down to what the judge's decree states, the divorce decree states. I can't answer that question because every divorce is different. And I would never want to even venture to get into that realm. This is the last place I'd ever want to be or talk about. And I'm not an attorney, guys. I cannot give legal advice. So please understand. I know you have questions, but there's only such a limit I can go to. Okay. Was there any other questions? I see Kieran has a question. No? No other questions? Okay. Let's move on. His entirety only relates to one property or all their properties. No, only the marital residence. Remember, Darwin courtesy rights expired after May 28, 1980. And if a spouse's name is on property that the other spouse owns, then that one spouse has no interest whatsoever in the spouse's property. So let's take the example once again. And I'm just going to try to illustrate this quickly. My wife and I have the house in Oakland. I purchased the house at LBI under my name. Also purchased a house in the Adirondacks under my name. And the Love Shack is a little old place in Hackensack. I purchased under my name to give to my Missy. Now, upon my death, the wife gets the Oakland house, and that's it. She has no interest in the Adirondack property or the Love Shack or the LBI property whatsoever because her name is not on the deed. If it were, then she would get those properties if her names were on the deed, but it isn't, so she doesn't have any ownership interest rights at all. And in my will, I leave the Love Shack to my Missy and my Adirondack house to my son and the LBI house to my daughter. And my wife gets the ownership of this marital residence. That's it. So that's how it works, guys. Was there any follow-up questions to that? What if there is one property with only one person on the deed and you get married to each other? Does her name get added? Doesn't have to be added. She's an owner in completion with you as her spouse if it's the marital residence. So let me stop the conversation right here and just reiterate this one more time. You buy a house. It's yours. Several years later, you get married. Now it's you and your spouse who own the house in its entirety, each with a 100% ownership interest. You die, she gets her 100% ownership interest. Whether you like it or not, guys or gals, if you're successful and buy real estate, and then get married at a later date, your spouse automatically owns the marital residence with you in 100% ownership interest. So understand, if you don't want that to occur, then you're going to have to talk to an attorney to come up with some sort of prenuptial agreement to limit the interests. And I'm not even going to venture into that realm. Again, I steer clear of that stuff. So understand, guys, marriage is a whole different level in many different ways of operating. You're no longer one person. You're two people as one. And both own this marital residence in 100% interest ownership. Was there any other questions before we move on? No, Ayana, break is mandatory. Have to take a break. Sorry. What is a Missy? It's talking about the mistress. Did I even have to justify that with an answer? Kind of confused you. Okay, I can understand that. This is not easy stuff, guys. If it was easy, everybody be doing it. Okay. Was there anybody else before we move on? Call it what you want. If two people joint, if one die, will the other be in servantee from them? I'm sorry. Oh, severalty, yes. So husband and wife own a property and one dies, and the surviving spouse is owner in severalty. That's correct. So why does your wife get the property you buy after marriage, but not the Love Shack? Because the marriage tenancy by the entirety, as I said, recognizes two people as one entity. When you marry, the term is the two become one. That's a legal interpretation as well. Therefore, they have ownership rights of what you own, whether you like it or not. By the way, when you get married, you don't exist as a person anymore. You are now two people as one. I shouldn't have to be talking about marriage here. Good Lord. But guys, understand marriage is a very different level. It's not the same as you and the guys buying property. It's completely different. So I'll tell you what, it's close enough to our break. Why don't we just take our break now? We'll come back at 3 and we'll pick up when we start talking about business types of ownership. Hang on. Just don't get married. Are you still a tenancy by entirety if you taxes? What? If you file taxes? Yes. You don't exist. Haha, you are her extension. Pretty much, Dubby. Yep. All right, guys, I'll see you at 3. All right, it's almost 3 o'clock. But before we start, real quick housekeeping matter. David Van Velde, I sent you a private message requiring you to take that link down that you posted. You did not comply. I'm asking you publicly in a nice manner to please remove the link as directed. There are no links posted on our chat room. If you do not, I have no other choice except to remove you from class, and you will not get credit for this afternoon. So you have a choice. Remove the link and continue, or we stop class now and we wait until you do it. Which will it be? Okay, guys, unfortunately, we are not able to continue our class. So we are on a holding pattern until Mr. Van Velde removes the link that he put on our website. David, please comply with my request and direction, or else you will be removed from the classroom. There is no negotiating. There is no talk of this. Please do it now. David, you have another 30 seconds. If you do not comply, you will be removed from the classroom. Thank you for removing the link. Guys, I'm dead serious when I say this. There is no posting of any links whatsoever in our conversation. None. We have zero tolerance for this. And as I explained earlier today, and as I explained yesterday, we've had problems in the past with getting our system infected with malware that comes through some links. So please, I don't want to have to do this. Believe me, there's no reason why we should. All we have to do is comply with the requirement that there is no links being posted, and we will have no problem. But please don't try my patience. You don't want to do that. So, enough said. Let's move on. All right. Business ownership of real estate. That's what we're talking about now. There's, excuse me, many different forms of business entities out there in the world. There's partnerships. There could be general partnerships or limited partnerships. General partnership is where all partners take on and invest equally and take on all responsibility of the company equally through all partners. And they all share equally in profits and losses. Where a limited partnership is usually operated by one general partner who takes the lion's share of profits but suffers the lion's share of liability. There's a general partner and there's limited partners. The limited partner's investment specifies their level of risk, and their only risk is the level of their investment. But that means their profit earned is to the level of their investment as well. So whether you're a general or limited partnership, it's just another way to form a corporate entity to own real property. Corporations, as a matter of fact, are technically artificial people created by law. That's what a corporation is. The downside of a corporation is that it could last forever. Yeah. All you got to do is, make enough profit to sustain your business, elect a new board of directors every several years, and you can go on forever. So here's a hint. Never own property as a joint tenant with a corporate co-owner, because you are human and you will die. And the right of survivorship means that the corporation gets it all. So just understand, there's partnerships, then there's corporations, and there's different types of corporations. There's S corps and C corps, and all corporations typically have a board of directors directing how the business moves. They usually have executives in a corporation. Whether it's an S corp or C corp could determine whether you're getting double taxed on the income produced by the corporation as business income and then as personal income, or whether you only singly taxed. There's sole proprietorships, which technically is not a corporation, but it's an individual owner of business. And that individual lives and dies by the profits and loss the business generates. So if the business is good and he makes money, then the money that the business made is the owner, the proprietor's own personal income. If the business loses money, that owner of the business wouldn't personally lose that money in that year. There's limited liability companies, LLCs. Many people use these for many different reasons. House flippers typically use these all the time. It limits personal exposure for liability because of its limited corporate structure. There are syndicates. There's joint ventures. What's the difference? Not much. A syndicate is a coming together of entities to create something bigger than either one can do, and it's temporary in nature. A joint venture typically is a coming together of dissimilar entities to do something bigger than either one of them can do, and is also usually a limited time frame, temporary. So a syndicate is coming together of like-kind entities, a joint venture, unlike entities coming together. Then there are real estate investment trusts. What's that? That's a company who raises money through sale of stocks or bonds or certificates to investors and buys real property not because of their prettiness or how they look in the market, but because of the income they produce. And then that trust, that real estate investment trust, takes those deeds of ownership and puts them in a trust, literally puts them in a trust. They're not to be touched. No one can touch the ownership rights, the deeds of those properties until the board of directors votes to do something with those deeds. And if they vote to get rid of the property, then they would release the deed from the trust and it would be sold. As that trust gains money through the income generated in the property, they can pay off their investors as they go along. Not all real estate investment trusts operate profitably. If you're thinking of investing in any one of these types of corporate structures, research, research, research. Talk to an attorney and a business advisor about your interests, and does this company or corporate structure meet your interest? And certainly your limit of liability. Are you a high-risk individual, or are you more of a safe better and only take the low-risk stuff? All this stuff has to be discussed between you and your business advisor before you move forward. But ownership of property by corporations is a real thing. Obviously, they own hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes in one corporate structure. There's worldwide hundreds of billions of dollars of corporately owned property out there. So guys, just understand that not just people own property, corporate entities own property, but there is a catch. When a corporation sells property, they have to have a corporate resolution authorizing the company to buy or sell property. They just can't do it. They have to have a corporate resolution by the board of directors authorizing the company to either buy or sell property. And if it's a big enough purchase or sale that it could affect the operating finances, they may have to put it out to the shareholders for a consensus vote. And if the shareholders approve, then they can go ahead and write up that resolution and sell or buy that property. But if the shareholders say no, then they don't do it. It's that simple. So there's many different types of corporate ownership of property. And we're not going to go into all of them and even discuss any of them. We're just mentioning that these are different types of corporate ownership interests. Condominium ownership. Let's go there. So my first purchase of real estate out of college was a condominium. So right out of college, 1980. That was when I graduated. Went to college up in Boston, Massachusetts. Boston's a great town. I lived up there for 15 years. Damn cold in the winter. Damn cold. But anyway, a couple years after getting out of college, about 1984, I decided it was time to maybe start settling down instead of chasing the single madman wildlife. Well, yeah, that was a long time ago. I had a good job, made good coin, decided to buying a real estate investment was probably a better thing to do, according to my buddies at the time. So I bought a condominium. Now, because I bought a condominium, there were rules and regulations about what I could and couldn't do while I lived there. I never read those directions. If I get a furniture kit from IKEA, who reads directions? Who needs directions? You just put it together, right? Well, no. It's always good to read the directions. Well, when buying a condo, I should have read the directions, because when I bought the condo, I started receiving fines for not adhering to the condo rules and regulations. What? There's rules, there's regulations? Yeah, and they were sometimes ridiculous. But the fact is, I bought into a deed restricted ownership, meaning I don't have the right just to do anything I want with my property. When I parked my car, it had to be at a 45-degree angle to the curb in my own spot. And if I didn't park 45-degree angles to the curb, I can get a ticket, of which I did for 25 bucks. Unreal. I didn't know that when I went to the pool and enjoyed splashing around with all the single women that I'd get a ticket for $25 for displaying a tattoo in public. What? Boy, oh boy. That was the last straw. I said, no way. And I moved out, sold the unit, moved on. Here's the thing, guys. Condominium is not a description of property. It's a description of ownership, condominium ownership. The description of the individual unit would be either a flat or a townhouse style. Flat being one level, townhouse up and down, multiple floors. So, condominium ownership is a ownership of real estate. I bought a specific unit. I got a deed to the unit that I bought, a flat. However, because I'm living in a communal atmosphere, I'm also named as an owner on the common elements of the property, or the master deed, which means because I own the property with all other owners, the common elements, the grounds, the walkways, the hallways, the elevators, the pool, the clubhouse, the tennis courts, and everything, that's all common property. And I have to pay a maintenance fee, the upkeep and maintenance of those common elements. Therefore, I'm named as a tenant in common with all other condo owners. Why tenant in common? Because we're all coming and going at different times. We could never achieve joint tenancy. So we'd be named as tenants in common on the master deed, and I had to pay maintenance fees for the upkeep and maintenance of the common elements. Condominium ownership is regulated under the New Jersey Horizontal Property Act of 1963. The Horizontal Property Act of 1963 delineates how condominiums must be created and operated, including having master deeds and individual deeds, having a financial prospectus to offer clients, to have a list of CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and requirements or responsibilities. So, when buying into a condo, you need to research this information to find out if this is what you want to get into. Like me, I just went into it blindly, not reading the stuff, and realized I'm not a condo dweller. I'm a single family house dweller because I don't like the rules that other people want to impose on me. But now that I'm getting a little older, and my joints don't work the way they used to, and my back gives out every once in a while, and now I'm thinking I don't want to do all this yard work all the time, shoveling snow in the 30-degree weather and mowing the grass and trimming the hedges. I don't want to do this anymore. Maybe it's time to move back into the idea of a condominium where it's all taken care of for me. All I do is pay somebody to take care of it for me, and it's a great deal. Thinking about it, but maybe not set on it. But condominium ownership is governed under the Horizontal Property Act. Now, you receive a unit deed and are named on the master deed. However, if a condominium corporation takes over an apartment building and does a conversion of the building into condominiums, there's certain rules and regulations that have to be adhered to. First of all, that condominium developer or converter cannot just boot people out of their apartments left and right. They have to honor the existing leases until they expire and then tell people they have to leave. So it's not just like they can come in and do whatever they want. They have to do what's right. Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go there. Jeez, how do we go? Here we go. All right. And if a tenant doesn't want to move out and is on a long-term lease, they just can't make them move out. There is a way to get them out, however. That condo conversion company could offer the tenants a buyout. In other words, they can tell them, we'll pay you to move out. And if so, the maximum amount of money they can offer an owner of an apartment interest, a lease rather, is $50,000 to move. Do they ever pay that amount? Probably not. But to get a tenant out, it may be cheaper to offer them $5 or $10 grand than to have to battle them in court trying to evict them through tenant court. That may not happen. So condo conversion rules are very specific. They're governed under the Horizontal Property Act of 1963. And so is the operation and administration of how a condominium ownership must be done. So condos have the same tax advantages of single-family home ownership. You get to write off your mortgage interest deduction. You get to write off your property taxes up to $10,000 a year and deduct those items against your income to pay less taxes, so you can get tax benefits from owning condominiums or private single-family homes. Then there are cooperatives, co-ops. Now, a lot of people don't have a very clear understanding of what a co-op is. First of all, you are not buying real estate when you buy a cooperative. What you're buying is shares or stock in a corporate interest. The building is a corporation. You're buying shares into that corporation. And because you bought shares in this corporation, they give you a proprietary lease on an apartment, which means you, the shareholder, now have a place to live. It's yours for as long as you are a member in good standing. What does that mean? Paying your bills. So, my first question, and I'm opening it up. Maybe you ever been a co-op or currently a co-op owner? Anybody? Nobody. Amazing. Okay. So, oh, hang on. Maybe there is one. I don't know. Anybody a co-op owner out there? Currently or previously? considering it. My boyfriend was before we met. My mom lived in New York City and one of her ex-husbands, okay, he'll never do it again. Ooh. Okay, so thanks for sharing, guys. Here's the thing. It's not for everybody. Back in the 90s, I got my license in 1993 BC, before computers. That's true. But anyway, in the mid-90s, my wife's brother, John, lived in Manhattan. He lived on West 72nd Street across from the Dakota. You know where John Lennon was killed? Right on West Central Park West. He bought a co-op right there in the corner, had a beautiful apartment. His upstairs neighbor was Sigourney Weaver, and he was running the high life because he was a bond trader down the street, and he did real well for himself. And John was the kind of guy who'd call me up like on a Thursday and say, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Come on in the city, we'll play. And we'd go in and go see a Knicks game or do something. It was a lot of fun. But anyway, one year he called me up and said, Tim, I got a problem. What's going on here? I go, what do you mean, John? He goes, my maintenance fees went from $450 a month to over $1,100 a month. And I don't know why. Did you have some sort of huge expense to maintain the building or something, John? Not that I'm aware of. Then let me ask you this. Are you aware of anybody moving out of the building recently? Yeah, a few families left. Did anybody move back in to occupy those? I don't know. I said, chances are when they moved out, nobody moved back in. Therefore, remember, you're a shareholder in the corporate structure, meaning you're responsible for the financial health along with all other shareholders in the company. So the less owners there are, the bigger the maintenance fees would be for the remaining shareholders in the building. Ah, that makes sense. A day later, he calls me up. He says, I talked to the doorman, and sure enough, about 5-6 families moved out, and nobody moved back in. So yeah, we're paying more maintenance because of that. Okay, cool. 6 months later, he calls me up. My bills are now over $2,000 a month. What? In other words, more people moved out and nobody's moving back in. He says, it's getting to the point now, it's getting a bit ridiculous paying these maintenance fees. And I only live in one apartment. It's crazy. I say, yeah, it's tough. You're a shareholder. That's your responsibility. Yeah, I know. Not a year later, he called me up. He said, hey, Tim, I want you and your wife, Sarah, his sister, to come up and visit me in my new house in Connecticut. Oh, where'd you buy? Oh, very nice. Wilton, Connecticut. Pretty ritzy. I said, what happened to the co-op? He goes, I threw the keys at the doorman and we moved out and I never looked back. I said, what happened? Our fees were going up to over $3,000 a month, and I thought I couldn't take that anymore. It's just ridiculous. So what happened in the mid-90s? I don't know. But in New York City today, co-ops are a very big deal. There's a lot of people that think it's the thing to do is to buy a co-op. But remember, you're not buying real estate. You don't have an ownership of real property. All you own is shares in a corporation. And as long as that corporation is financially healthy, those shares are worth something. So if you want to sell your unit, you should be able to get what you want. But if the financial health of the corporation is not good, then the value of those shares starts to go down and you could lose money when you sell. According to Dearborn, the company that publishes this book, cooperative ownership is the most stable living environment there is in the United States. Now, where they got that information, I don't know. I can't challenge it because there's no reference. I can't say single family houses are more stable than co-ops. I don't know because I can't find the information they're using to justify their point. All I can say is, according to Dearborn, co-ops are the most stable tenancies there is. You still get the same tax advantages of home ownership because you can get a mortgage to buy the shares to buy a co-op. And because the mortgage interest is deductible and the taxes you pay through your maintenance fees is deductible, you still have the same write-offs. And then there's Other types of ownership, townhouses. Those are architectural things. Remember, multi-floor units up and down? Well, you can have row houses of townhouses all put together, brownstones. As I said, Jersey City is notorious, Hoboken notorious, brownstones all over the place, side-to-side units, no alleyways, just side-to-side units, where they have common walls known as party walls that we specified before. And owners may have shares of common elements, so they may have a homeowners association for those townhouse-style buildings, those brownstones. It's another type of ownership. You do own real estate, and you do get the write-offs of ownership from owning real estate. And then there's timeshares. Oh, there are timeshares. Anybody a timeshare owner out there? Anybody wish they were a timeshare owner? Anybody wish they were never a timeshare owner? Just asking. Anybody out there? Scam. Wish I was Disney. No way, Jose. I am. My father, he loves it. Never. It's not for everyone, guys. It's not for everyone. So let me try to explain exactly what timeshare ownership is. Wish I was. Okay, so let me moderate here. No, I used to be. I hated it. Okay, so you were successful then in selling your share. Good for you. Here's the thing about timeshares. Number one, you are a fractional owner interest of real property. And when I mean fractional, I mean fractional. Now, I have a very close friend, Paul. He's my fishing buddy. He's my plumber. He's a good drinking buddy, too. About 8 years ago, he and his wife went down to Florida. And when he came back, he says, Tim, just letting you know, me and the wife bought a villa in Florida. I'm like, cool, a villa. Like you got what, like a thatched tiki hut next to the pool with a cabana bar, and you got a dock with 2 Bertram yachts. What do you got? What's a tiki? What's a villa? Well, not exactly what you're thinking, a villa. Well, we bought a timeshare. Okay, that's cool. You bought a timeshare. Where? Orlando. The House of the Mouse, right? Good place to have one. If you can't make it, you can rent it out and probably make some money. I said, with who? He said, the Marriott Corporation. Okay, so you went big daddy of them all, didn't you? Yep. I said, why? Because I wanted to. So what week did you get? We got the last week in July. Oh. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to Florida in July. Guys, I mean, you literally get up and open a door and you immediately turn into a bucket of sweat and your clothes are ruined from the minute you get up. It's terrible. Humidity, 1,000%. Temperature, 100,000 degrees. It's tough. Thank God Mr. Carrier invented air conditioning. Why did you go last week in July? It's the only one they had left. But Paul, you're going to go down in July. He goes, hey, that doesn't bother me. Heat humidity doesn't bother me. Cool, well, whatever. I said, but why there? He goes, because they have this trade-off program. And let me tell you something. Paul and his wife have, if you excuse the term, abused their trade-off rights. Over the past 8 years, they have been to Cozumel, Anchorage, Alaska, Paris, Lisbon, Rome, and I don't know where else, but they came back last year from Aruba. And as soon as they landed, I, sat down, had a few beers with him. He says, we're going to move to Aruba to retire. I said, oh, Aruba is 82 degrees every day, low humidity, perfect weather. That's the place you can retire to and have a good day. But here's the thing. They are a fractional owner interest in the property. Now think about this number. In the Marriott Hotel in Orlando, there are 300 units. There are 52 weeks in a year, which means there are a potential of 52 unit owners of each unit, which means there could be 15,750 600 owners of that Marriott resort. That means you are 1/15,600th of an owner in that property. You, 1/15,600th owner of a property, are responsible for your share of the taxes, of the maintenance, of your cleaning fee, and that comes every year, and you have to pay that. So when I say you're a fractional owner, I'm talking fractional here. Now, what does this right give me? It means I can use that unit for the same week every year, and it's mine, literally. But the day I move out, the next week's unit owner moves in, and it's his for that week. Or I could rent it out if I don't go down, or I could trade it off for various locations. The Marriott has a great program, by the way. I don't personally own a timeshare. I don't have any desire to, but it's not for everybody. But some people find it a really nice thing to do. The problem is when you want to come time to sell your timeshare to someone else. They don't hold their resale value, guys. You're probably going to lose money on the resale of a timeshare, that's all. But you're purchasing a fractional interest in ownership of the property, and it's for a specific time each year. So if you like vacationing the same time in the same place every year, well, timeshares might be for you. I'm the kind of guy that if I'm going to go on vacation, I'm like, honey, pack the bags. We're going to hop on a plane tonight. She says, where are we going? I said, wherever we find we want to go. We don't have any hotel reservations. We went to Europe, 10 days, no reservations, anything. We just backpacked, got Euro rail passes, and had a blast. That's the way I go. Everybody, other people have to have itineraries and schedules. I'm not that kind of guy. But again, if you are that kind of person, then timeshares may be just up your alley. But again, fractional ownership interest. So before I move on, are there any questions about these different types of ownership interests? Or any comments? Okay, that's cool enough. Used it, but you hated it. Can you get a mortgage? Well, your acquisition cost isn't going to be that much, so no. Was there anybody else before we move on? Because I'm about to wrap it up, guys. Can you cancel timeshare anytime? No. Once you're an owner of that unit, you own it. Maybe it's for a specific period of time. Maybe it's forever. That's why you better check it out before you buy. All right, I do want to move on. Was there anybody else with a comment or question? How are they able to go to all those different places? Marriott has a trade-off program against all their properties worldwide. Yes, because they own the timeshare, correct. How do you get out? I've yet to find out an answer to that question. All right, guys, got to move on. Good questions, good input, but I do need to move. All right. Timeshare laws apply to all sold units in New Jersey, whether property is located in state or out of state. And a timeshare buyer has certain rights. If you buy a timeshare, you have the right to cancel up to 7 days after signing. You can cancel by certified mail or in person, and the seller must refund all payments within 30 days. Timeshare developers, when selling timeshare units, must provide honest information to the purchaser. They cannot make any predictions of future increase in value, though they mostly do. They must make no suggestions how the buyer may use or exchange the timeshares, because it's very difficult to do. And it does not apply to 10 or few units, or investments of less than $3,000, or on resales of timeshares. Now we're done with the chapter. So let's open up our test survey questions for the chapter 7 and finish up our day. Here we go. Number 1. When buying a property, one party paid 1/3 of the cost and the other party paid the balance. The seller's deed received at closing conveyed the property to the two parties without further explanation. As a result, the two owners are Now, my answer is going to blow some of you guys away because if you didn't read the chapter, you would not understand how this could be true. The answer is, of which 39% of you did get correct, is B for boy. Tenants in common, each owning a 1/2 undivided interest. Well, wait a minute. One guy has 1/3, the other guy has 2/3. How can you say he has 1/2 undivided interest? He owns 1/3 percentage of ownership in the property. But because there's two owners, there's two parties that have 1/2 interest in the property. And the interests are indivisible. What does that mean? Ever see the movie War of the Roses, Kathleen Turner and who was it, Michael Douglas? That was a great movie. Anyway, it's husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Rose. And they are at odds and they need to get a divorce. So one day, I think it was Michael Douglas, paints a red stripe down the middle of the house inside and says, "That's your half. This is my half. You can't come over on my half and I'm not going on your half." In other words, they were trying to physically divide the property by a paint line. And then one day, someone takes a chainsaw and tries to cut a separating barrier between. Can't do that. Remember, if there's two owners, each have a 1/2 interest of ownership, which is indivisible. You can't physically divide it. It's one property. It's indivisible. So when we say undivided interest, we're talking about the two owners each having a 1/2 ownership interest in property. That's all. So B for boy is the correct answer. Number 2. If a property is held by two or more owners as tenants in common, upon the death of one owner, the ownership of his or her share passes to who? How are we doing here, guys? Come on, let's see some answers. If property is held by two or more owners as tenants in common, upon the death of one owner, of the ownership of his or her share passes to. And 67% of you, 2 out of 3, got it correct. B for boy, the heirs or whoever is designated under the deceased owner as owner's will, not as well, will. Number 3, in New Jersey, deeds conveying property to a married couple creates what kind of ownership? New Jersey, deed conveying property to a married couple creates tenancy by the entirety. 80% of you were correct in that one. B for boy. Number 4, which of the following statements applies equally to joint tenants and tenants by the entirety? Oops. Sorry. Which of the following statements applies equally to joint tenants and tenants by the entirety? And 3 out of 4, 75% of you correctly answered B for boy. The survivor becomes complete owner. Remember, joint tenants, right of survivorship. Heirs don't get anything. The surviving owner gets everything. Number 5, 2 cousins inherited their grandfather's farm. The cousin who lives on the farm does not pay rent and refuses to pay the taxes. A slug. The non-occupant cousin can then do what? And I didn't mention it. It's in your chapter. If you read it, you know the answer. And that would be 61% of you got it correct. Sue for partition. I didn't go over it, but let's take the example of, and I'm going to do this on the whiteboard real quick. A, B, and C are joint tenants. C says, you know what? I just got married. And if I die, I want my kids to inherit my share, but I'm a joint tenant. I can't do that. So he says to A and B, hey, I want to reorganize our ownership so I can be a tenant in common with you guys. And A and B say, go pound sand. We're not changing ownership rights. If you die, we're getting your share. C doesn't like that. He made a mistake. But you know what? He's in it now. How can he get out of it? C can hire an attorney and create a suit for partition, meaning the court then decides if they can separate ownership interests, and if they do, they can reappropriate the ownership as C being a tenant in common with A and B still as joint tenants, so that if C dies, then his heirs do get his share. Or the suit for partition could create the requirement that the whole property gets sold and dividends split up between the 3, or profit split up to 3, and then you can do whatever you want. So a suit for partition can be brought against additional owners to separate your ownership interest, partition your ownership interest from them, or sell the property and force the sale of the entire property to satisfy your interest, to get rid of the ownership interest. So I hope that helped out, but suit for partition was the answer, correct? Number 6, owners A and B own an apartment building as joint tenants. If owner A sells his interest to person C, then what? You have to do some critical thinking here, guys. Oh, not me, no way. Owners A and B own an apartment building as joint tenants. If owner A sells his interest to person C, then About 44% of us got it correct, and that is C. Person C and owner B now become tenants in common. You can't be a joint tenant by yourself. It has to be in conjunction with someone. And since that owner sold his right to C, then B and C are now tenants in common. There is no more joint tenancy. There is no more right of survivorship. Number 7. Shortly after their marriage, a couple buys a home together. If the deed states nothing to the contrary, they are if the deed states nothing to the contrary, they are 85% of you correctly answered A, tenants by the entirety because of the marriage. Yes, A. Number 8, two people buy a small shopping plaza together. If the deed states nothing to the contrary, they are I actually mentioned this when we talked about the concept. If more than one person own property together as a corporate interest, and the deed doesn't specify how they are to take ownership, then it automatically defaults to C, tenants in common. Yeah, tenants in common. All right, number 9. X, Y, and Z are joint tenant owners of a hunting lodge. Z dies, leaving everything to his wife. Which statement is true? And about 63% of you are correct answering C. X and Y are now the only owners of the property. Correct. Remember, right of survivorship. If Z dies, his heirs get nothing. Even though he willed his interest to them, they get nothing. X and Y are now the only owners. Number 10. Two friends want to buy a house together and ensure that if one dies, the other inherits automatically. They should take title as and about 73% of you are correct answering B for boy, joint tenants. Correct. Number 11. Two friends buy a store together as joint tenants. One party dies, leaving everything she owns to her daughter. The original owner now owns the store. How? And 73% of you answered correctly. D for dog, in severalty. Remember, joint tenants, right? A survivorship. One dies, the other owns in severalty now. Only one person owns the property. Number 12, an artificial person created by illegal means is known as a android, cyborg, and automaton are not choices, guys. An artificial person created by legal means is known as a. And 3 out of 4, you 75% answered correctly. B for boy, it's a corporation. Correct. Number 13, the 4 unities required to create a joint tenancy in New Jersey include all the following, except which one's not in there? A good 60% of you did answer correctly that partnership is not the right one. That's correct. PITT, possession, interest, time, and title are the 4 unities. Not partnership, possession. Number 14, here comes another whopper. X, Y, and Z each invest $1,000 in a new business. X and Y do not participate in the operation of the new venture, but agree to let Z make all decisions regarding its day-to-day management. If the business experiences a $6,000 loss, how is liability shared under these facts? First, we have to try to think of what kind of ownership interest they have. And boy, we're split between 2 options. 43% chose A, 44% chose D. Which one's correct? The answer is D as in dog. As limited partners, X and Y are liable only to the extent they formed a limited partnership with Z being the general partner and X and Y being the limited partners. D is the correct answer. Number 15, common elements include All right, well, 96% chose D, all of these. All of those are common elements, correct. Number 16, the term C, C, and R refers to. I posted the link for the homework as well as my email address already. So if you want, you can access your homework, chapters 5, 6, and 7 tonight. Number 16, the term CC&R refers to B for boy, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. 2 out of 3, 67% of you had it correct. Number 17, the owner of a cooperative apartment receives a lot of people starting to drift off to Netherland here. I don't blame you. It's a long day. It's a long day. The owner of a cooperative apartment receives 83% of you got it. D, shares in a corporation. Correct. You don't own real estate. You own shares in a corporation. 18, the right to reject prospective new owners is held by the board of directors of a what? And by the way, they can be highly discriminatory too. And I'll tell you why when I give you the answer. And 60% of you are correct. It is a cooperative. Guys, co-ops, you're not buying real estate, so the municipal land use laws, excuse me, the New Jersey laws against discrimination and the federal fair housing programs don't affect them. They're private corporation and can discriminate based on any reason except for race. And they can be very discriminatory, just so you know. Number 19, a man owns a fee simple interest in his apartment together with a specified undivided percentage of common elements in the main, excuse me, it's not a men's building. Good Lord. The man's building, I'm sorry, it's really poorly done. A man owns a fee simple interest in an apartment together with with a specified undivided percentage of common elements, period. The man's building is organized as a, that's better. Should be a period after elements. Boy, we got to correct that. A man owns a fee simple interest in his apartment. He owns a fee simple interest in his apartment together with a specified undivided percentage of common elements. The man's building is organized as a, 80% of you are correct who answered a condominium, A. Number 20, the buyer of an apartment receives shares in a corporation and a proprietary lease to her apartment. Her building is organized as a, And 93% of you give you a thumbs up. Got it correct. A cooperative. Yes. 21. A board of directors commonly reserves the right to approve or disapprove of potential buyers in which form of joint ownership? And we already talked about this just a few minutes ago. So I'd expect a good number of you to get it right. Well, 85% is a pretty good number. So yes, 85% answered A, cooperative, correctly. Yes, A. Number 22, stock in a cooperative apartment is usually considered stock is what? What kind of property is stock? And 57% of you are correct, answering B, personal property. Yes, B for boy. 23, the term reserves refers to, I didn't go over this, it's in your textbook. Again, that's why it's important that you read the textbook so you pick up on these things. The term reserves refers to real good. And 80% of you are correct, answering D for dogs. D for dog, funds set aside for major repairs in the future. Capital reserve funds are put in budgetary budgets. Number 24, long-term stability of residence is most characteristic of, according to the book, it is what? And 60% of you got it correct. It is a cooperative. 24 answers A, a cooperative. And the last question for the day, a couple has the right to live in Unit 6B only between March 3rd and March 15th of every year. For the rest of the year, others have the exclusive right to live in the unit. This type of ownership arrangement described by these facts is most likely what? Okay, you guys rocked this one. Holy crap, 98%. Way to go. B for boy, a timeshare. Absolutely. Good for you. Good job. All right, guys, real good today. Once again, 3 full chapters. Not easy stuff, but we got through it. So for tonight, your homework assignment is chapter 5, 6, and 7. The link is rvcareercenter.com/homework. It's right there. I put it up. And you don't have to turn them in. Do them for your edification. We'll go over it in the morning. And tomorrow, a real interesting start to the day. We're going to talk about real estate taxes tomorrow morning. All right. So tomorrow, chapters 8 and 9 at 9 a.m. We're done for the day. You've met your requirements. Good for you. Thanks for joining us. If you don't have any